As a creative aspect, TV is one of the best things that we do as a species. Along with music and film and books, they bring out the best creative of all of us. They entertain and they bring so much joy to many. They invoke emotion and enable us to feel things that we bury sometimes deep down. That's what this podcast is for. Welcome to A Million Little TV Shows. This is what I call the breakdown while I break down. Each week I will go through a different TV show, a different season of that TV show, and different episodes of that show. And I will break down not only emotions, but I will break down stories from my life, and let you know why these TV shows mean so much to me, and why I believe that they are some of the most important shows out there. This podcast is here to highlight a lot of smaller TV shows, or TV shows that don't really get a platform, because we know of a bunch of TV shows that get a multitude of different podcasts. Ted Lasso, Game of Thrones, The Office, they've all got several podcasts out there analysing all types of different things. But there's not many out there for the little guy, and that's what I'm trying to highlight. So each week I will go through a different show, different seasons, different episodes, and I will go across all different kinds of genres and different countries to bring you what I believe is some of the best TV out there. So I'm glad you're here with me. I'm glad you're here for this journey. And if you've watched the shows before and you wanted to come here and get an analysis on them and have someone go through them and pick out bits that you might have enjoyed, then I'm glad you are here. If, however, you have never watched the show and you just want to come and have someone talk in your ear about different TV shows, I'm glad you are here. But I hope that it inspires some people to go and seek out these TV shows. They deserve to be watched. They were made with love and care, and they are the same as this podcast, made with love and care. I am your host, Mike, and I will take you through every adventure, every horror, every piece of drama, and I hope that you enjoy the show. Hello there, and welcome back to this A Million Little TV Shows podcast. This is now episode 13 of season 11, and it is the final episode of this season, and I am so excited for what's coming next season. I will run through it shortly, but this season's been a blast. It really has. I've loved some of the shows that I've been watching. They've all been phenomenal, and it's been very different with obviously not having Inside Number 9 or not having A Million Little Things, but we've still had some regular things in there, things like Loudermilk and of course Mindhunter, which is the one that we're going to be covering today. So first of all, thank you for all being here. I absolutely love doing this podcast, and it's just a really fun part of my week. Even the editing, I mean, I've got it down to a T now, so I'm quite happy with the way that I can edit the whole thing. But yeah, I'm really enjoying this podcast, and I think I've got better as time's gone on. I hope I have anyway, obviously, as I struggle through a sentence. But I think for now, what I should do is just go through what's going to come up next season, and then we will get into today's episode. So, next season, we're going to be covering The Lost Flowers of Alice Hart, The Bonfire of Destiny, The Hunting Wives, Bates Motel, Friends from College, and Around the World in 80 Days. Now, only one of those is a repeat season, and that is Friends from College, but that will be wrapping up that season as well. So going forward, we're probably going to have the Bates Motel, which is going to be a regular, because that's at least 5 seasons long, and then probably The Hunting Wives. We may do what I did with Ginny and Georgia when that season 3 came out, although that was a bit of a slog for me, but I don't mind doing it for this podcast. But I do believe that there is going to be a season 2 of The Hunting Wives. So we'll see if that ever comes to fruition. And of course, as you know, I want a couple of other things to have some extra seasons, things like Mindhunter and Hannibal, but we can't have it all, can we? But let's get into today's episode. So, as I just said, I'd like a season 3 of Mindhunter, but today is Mindhunter season 2, episodes 7 to 9, the finale. Episode 7. So Holden and Bill are still down in Atlanta, and they are looking into these Atlanta murders. Obviously, Bill keeps having to go back to Virginia every couple of days because, well, he's got commitments up there, but he hasn't told Holden what he's doing. So Holden seems very resentful anytime that Bill has to go home. And Holden doesn't want to seem to accept the fact that Bill has other commitments other than his job. Whereas Holden seems to just be all-encompassing on this. But it seems the guy who left the adult magazines in the woods with his DNA all over it and his fingerprints all over it has been pulled in. They're also looking into his truck, but you can tell that Holden he doesn't think it's him. one little bit. He knows that all these murders and all these kidnappings that have been happening in the area can't be this guy. Again, we saw it in the last couple of episodes where they actually tried to trick the kids into the car, and it seems that they were only getting into cars with black men. And since this guy was white, we can kind of suspect that they probably have the wrong man. But his DNA and his fingerprint has been found at a crime scene, and Holden knows that these people will go back to the scene of the crime. So he understands why the guy's here, he just doesn't understand why the guy's here. And so during the interview, they keep asking about the children in the area, and they keep asking about certain places that this guy's been, and then they ask about this road where they found these pornographic magazines. And then he has to come clean, which sounds like he did over those magazines. But essentially what he's been doing is, because his wife is pregnant and he hasn't been able to get any for a while, or so he says, he headed out in his truck with these magazines with him and jacked off. That's as simple as it was. And then he threw the magazines out of the car, hoping that his wife would never see them, and now he's been hauled in on one of the biggest cases in the area. He also gets asked about if he has any ties to the clan, and he says, well, no, I have nothing to do with that. I think those people are abhorrent, and no, it's not something that I'm into. And yeah, I agree on that, and I hope if you're listening to this, you agree too. But Holden is getting to be at a bit of a loss with this guy, because he knows he's not the guy. He seems to just be going through the motions. And it seems like any time that something comes up, Bill is happy to pursue it. Whereas Holden knows that this isn't right, this doesn't feel right, and therefore, why are we going after this? He's tenacious to stay on case, but the problem is, bodies are dropping, and kids are turning up dead all over the city. So they can't just stay where they are. So Holden comes up with a plan. He thinks that what would be a good idea is, since there is going to be a march in a couple of days to honour these children that have died in the area and still the ones that are missing, Holden decides that maybe if they put crosses up at certain points around the towns, for instance, where people have been murdered or where bodies have turned up before, that maybe he can lure this guy out. He can get him to come out into the open and either take a trophy or do something that will help them find him. And he thinks that if this man sees one of these white crosses, it will be like a beacon to him. And knowing their compulsion to go back to these places, maybe he'll go back and, like I say, take a souvenir. Or in this case, he ends up leaving a dead body. However, this obviously won't go down well because, well, that's the last thing they need. Another dead body on their hands. And another dead child. But as I've said, Bill is hopping between Atlanta and Virginia, Fredericksburg to be precise. And so it seems that his schedule is Monday he'll get up, he'll go to the airport, get on a plane, go to Atlanta, go to the office, do his thing for 3.5 days, jump back on a plane on a Thursday or a Thursday night, maybe a Friday morning, fly back to Fredericksburg or Virginia at least, and then head to the office for half a day and then head home. He stays with his family for the weekend and then that's it, he's going back. So it's a real tough time for Bill right now. And every time he gets back, he just seems to be more and more disheveled, beat up, just in a bad way. This whole thing is getting to him. And obviously he's seeing parallels of what his son did while he is actually in Atlanta. So for instance, when they put the cross together, because it comes in an assembly kit, he looks down and just sees this cross and then remembers what his son did. And it just comes flooding back to him. He isn't really dealing with it and he can't deal with it. And now it turns out that his son has actually gone silent on him. He won't even talk to his dad, or his mum in this case. It's never explicitly stated, but Bill does say he doesn't talk to anybody. So it's a really rough time for them right now. And when the social worker turns up for a surprise visit, she ends up asking questions of what Bill actually does. And of course, one of those main questions is, has he ever seen any of the material that you bring home, or have you ever brought home cases, is the actual terminology. But of course, we know that Bill does, and we know that Brian has seen these types of material. And that is potentially why that toddler ended up where it ended up. He tries to speak to Wendy about this. Obviously, he tells her that he's now not speaking to anyone, but also he asks the question, did I fuck him up in any way? Wendy tries to reassure him, but of course, she doesn't really know. She knows Bill well enough, but she doesn't know what happened in the boy's past. Obviously he's adopted, so we're not sure of where he actually came from, but Bill is worried. He's like, was this just lying dormant in him, or has this been something that's been there for a while? And there seems to have been no signs of this actually happening yet, up until this point. So it really seems to have come out of the blue for Bill and his wife. And speaking of Nancy, when she's actually home alone, she ends up getting a visit from the parents of the dead child. Of course, you feel sympathy for the poor mother of this child, but you also feel sympathy for Nancy at this point because she's bringing this woman into her home and you don't know what she's going to get. She's obviously going to have to run through everything and possibly hear negative things said about her child. But at this point, you don't know what's actually happened, so you don't know what to believe. And as much as you want to believe in your child that they're the best and that they can do anything and blah, 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 this is a different world now. That child was part of something incredibly wrong. And as much as he tried to do something about it, he never told anyone, he never went for help. And I'm not saying that should be something you put on a youngster at all, but the kid shouldn't have been in that situation. And it's just a terrible bunch of events that happened and has ended up in tragedy. And it's such a shame. And the mother says just as much. She says that she forgives their son for what has happened. And she forgives Nancy for what has happened as well. Because when she asks if she could actually speak to Brian, Nancy says no. And as a mother, she understands why. Because she would protect her child as much as possible. And she forgives her for saying no. And forgives her for trying to protect her child. And it's quite a sweet moment, but obviously Nancy is in a bad way over this. She doesn't know what to do for the best for Brian. And it's heartbreaking to see her struggling this much with what has happened and not being able to communicate with her own son over it. And then we've got Wendy. Wendy is really pissed off with herself for these interviews that she has taken on, and she thinks that maybe they're a bit of a waste of time. And when Agent Smith tries to buoy her up about it, she feels like he's just saying that. Then she ends up going to speak to Ted Gunn, who gives her his thoughts on what happened as well. He says in no uncertain terms that she should basically be stuck in the office back in Quantico so that she can just analyse the data that comes in. She is okay at the interviews, but it's not her strong point, and maybe she should stick to what she's good at. And obviously this is something that gets to Wendy because she wants to be good at all of this. She wants to be able to do the interviews and be able to help out with the workload that is there. But she's told by Gunn that basically she's going to be getting some help very, very soon. He gives her a bunch of CVs that she's going to have to go through and get Bill to go through as well. And they will put together a team that then Bill will train and send out into the field. And within no time at all, she's going to have shit tons of cases to actually be looking at. So she really needs to be buckling down with what she's got in front of her and not going off around the country doing these interviews. He also has another dig at Agent Smith, which, as I've said before, there's definitely some reason he doesn't like him. But back to Wendy, she ends up going home and sits down with Kay, and Kay seems to be happy where she is. They're kind of living together now. Kay is there 4 days a week, and they seem to be in a really good place, except for the point when Wendy asks whether Kay will move in. But she essentially fucks it up because she asks her if she's going to move into the spare room. And Kay's like, are we roommates or partners? Because if I'm moving in, I want to be in your bed. I don't just want to be in the spare room. And all Wendy was thinking about was giving her some space. But she says, well, that's all well and good, but that's not the way to ask whether I want to move in, whether I want to be in your spare room. So I don't think I'm going to carry on this conversation. And she just walks out. So Wendy's having a really tough time of it. Bill's having a really tough time of it. Holden seems to be having a tough time trying to get everyone on board with what his ideas are. And we've still got a killer in Atlanta that is really taking its toll on the whole team. Episode 8. And so, once again, we see our ADT man. It seems that he is now back on the prowl. He's driving around in his ADT van, and he starts spying on a woman before casually driving off while her husband comes out to help her with the shopping. And then we go back to Atlanta, and it seems that the governor is putting up a $100,000 reward for any information that leads to the arrest of whoever is killing these kids. And they're also told that there will be a concert coming to town with Sammy Davis Jr. and Frank Sinatra. they will be putting on this gig, and whatever they make for the gig will actually pay for this reward. So it's not coming out of any taxpayer budgets, so the people don't have to worry. Plus, it will drive interest for this actual event, which, I mean, at this point, the town fucking needs it. But Holden thinks that this is a good idea for a new plan, because he thinks that if he can get some sort of amateur security teams together, like additional security, that whoever is doing these things will actually attend the event. Because at this point, this is what's driving him. Murdering these kids and going back to the scenes and all these things that he's doing, they're all leading Holden to think that he is basically taking the piss out of them a little bit. So he's hoping that this guy's going to sign up, be part of the security for this event, and then they will have a list of names. And if they can profile this guy, as they have already, they've profiled him as a 20 to 30-year-old black man, that maybe they can find more information, that maybe they can actually narrow their search and get a list of candidates for who they actually want to bring in, or at least someone that they can surveil. Bill, on the other hand, has been surveilling members of the Ku Klux Klan because Holden doesn't believe that these people aren't worth looking into. Bill says, well, we've got to do something. Bill is put on a task force to actually start looking into these guys, and if they can bring a few in and arrest them for other things, then that'd be great. If they end up arresting them for these murders, even better. But generally, because these guys are always in and out of the system, they know what's going on. And as soon as they start getting questioned, they ask for a lie detector test. They pass the lie detector test and they are let go. But one of them is brought in because he's caught on tape basically saying that he would kill one of the boys that's actually been killed. And so when he's confronted with it, he tells them that that's when he will take the test, which he obviously passes. In the meantime, while they're interviewing this guy, another body turns up and they have to come up with a new plan. But Holden is just pissed off at Bill because of everything that's going on. So Bill keeps going back and forth to Virginia, as I've said before. And at the time when he's in Fredericksburg, it seems like his whole marriage is falling apart. He gets home, he walks through the door, and his wife hasn't actually been looking after the place, it would seem. There's dishes that haven't been washed, there is shit everywhere, and it's not the Nancy that he knows. She's never been that way. She's never let the house go to ruin. But it seems like things have started to slip. And it's because of everything that's been going on with Brian. Once he gets home, Bill asks what's next. And she gives him a list. She tells him, look, you're going to go pick him up from school. You're going to do whatever you do with him. And these are the times that he needs to be doing these things. And just the general schedule, just to remind Bill of what it is. But then she tells Bill that she's going out and just leaves. She is really having a hard time with what has happened. And it was only when she was bathing him earlier on in the week that she realised that it's the first time in a long time she's actually seen him as her child. Since this whole event, she's kind of shut herself off and shut herself down from him. And she tells Bill that she is so pleased that he isn't actually truly a part of her and that she never birthed him because she would be wondering what was wrong with her. Bill picks Brian up and he ends up taking him for ice cream. He sits him down and he starts talking about just old memories, trying to get something out of Brian, just trying to get some sort of reaction because every time that he says anything to him, he's just staring blankly. And it's only when he tells him about a fishing trip that he had and how he caught a fish the first time that Brian starts to perk up when he realises that the fish might have died. And this terrifies Bill. He's kind of shocked by the fact that that's the thing that came out of this kid's mouth. Did it die? Feels like Brian is a little bit obsessed with death right now. And the only thing you can think about is, has he been obsessed with death since before? Has he been obsessed with death since before the killing of this child? Or has it fucked him up so badly that now every time he has to know if something died or not? But when Bill goes back to Atlanta, he finds Holden and Jim Barney down by a river. They've found another body. They're currently fishing it out of the actual river, and this is where the plan comes into play. But first of all, Holden speaks to Bill because he feels like Bill isn't in the game right now. He's giving him a rundown of what's been going on, and he realises that why should I be doing this? Why should I be telling my partner what we're up to? Why isn't he here all the time? And he goes away and he asks him to explain himself. Bill basically says, I don't have to explain myself to you, but since we're here, I might as well tell you what's going on. He basically tells Holden everything. That he's trying to hold his marriage together, he's trying to look after his son, he's trying to investigate these murders, he's trying to do paperwork so that he can actually hire more people to do the work that he's doing right now. And if it wasn't for someone like Holden being his partner, he wouldn't be here, because he is only here to keep an eye on Holden. He's basically there to hold his hand and make sure he doesn't fuck things up again. He tells him that he needs him to be more professional going forward, just so he can actually eventually be taken off this whole case if they're going to end up continuing on with this, because he needs a break. They go back to the station and realise that if there is a child in the river, and the reason that the killer has now done this is because they started to find fibres on the children they were finding, so he's decided to start putting them in the river instead. That way any fibre traces will be washed off. Holden tells them that what they need to start doing is actually surveying the rivers. Now, there's one main river that he is using, and so they're probably going to have to start surveying the bridges, because he would generally put the body in the middle of the river so that it would float down. So that's what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to start staking out the bridges within the town, and that turns out that there's around 13, 14 of them, and it's just going to be such a task force to put together to actually do this, but now it's their only hope. What they don't know is that the task force is actually going to be coming to an end very soon, because they only have roughly 4 weeks. They go out night after night after night, and they never catch anyone. It ends up that they end up with more kids being dragged out these rivers, and nobody spots anyone. And so they end up going to their last day. Everyone's disappointed, everyone's been putting the hard yards in, everyone's been putting full shifts in, and they really can't catch a break. Holden finds out some information about one of the kids actually being paid for taking photos of them, which we can only insinuate one thing, that these are certain types of photos that this guy is taking. And he gets a small lead on this, but it's all for nothing really. They're going to go out that night, and this is going to be it. They're going to have one more night of this, and then they're just going to have to turn it over. There's no more money. And so they head out. There is a lot of chatter over the radios, and then all of a sudden we hear, I just heard a splash. Everyone starts to zone in on what's going on, and then Jim Barney actually sees a car driving towards him. The lights come on, and he realises that it may have just started. It drives down the road, it turns back round, and Jim has got everyone coming towards him. He puts on his lights, and he pulls out into the road. He arrests this man, and when Bill and Holden turn up, in front of us we see a 20 to 30-year-old black man, and he's basically driving a station wagon that Holden had also predicted, as well as a few other characteristics about him. Softly spoken, well presented. And so we are introduced to Wayne Williams. Now, as for Wendy throughout this episode, she is just stuck where she is. But she goes and sees Kay. Her and Kay have really started to get on better than they were before, and it seems that all is forgiven from what happened the other day. And so the passion between them seems to be heating up a little bit. And Wendy essentially tells her that all she wants is Kay. That's it. That's all she wants in her life right now. Just that stability and that support system and everything that comes with it. However, Kay panics and realises that she's got her nights mixed up and that her son will be appearing soon. And so Wendy thinks that she's going to meet this kid for the first time. But when she actually hears the conversation with Kay and her ex-husband, she realises that Kay's a totally different person around them. And when Kay basically disregards the relationship that she's got with Wendy by telling her ex-husband that it's no one special upstairs or that she's not seeing anyone special, Wendy takes offence to this. She walks out because she doesn't need this shit in her life anymore. After everything that Kay has said to her about maybe coming out and being the person that you want to be and being the person that you should be and being as amazing as you are, Wendy realises that Kay's full of shit. And so she goes home, and the next time she speaks to Kay, she tells her as much. That she thinks she's full of shit because she doesn't practice what she preaches. And that maybe she needs to have a hard look at herself rather than playing this incredible person that she's been portraying so far. And finally, episode 9. So we pick up literally where we left off. We're still on this bridge and they are talking to Wayne Williams. However, to say he's just been pulled over by the FBI and fucking bunch of cops, and he has a bunch of cops around him, he seems very, very calm. Like, weirdly calm. He stands and he talks to the cops and he answers every question that they've got. They try an intimidation tactic of trying to put him in their car and have his car investigated, which he allows. He doesn't put up any sort of fight. He barely even raises his voice. He just does as he's asked. He sits and he talks with them, and eventually Bill steps out. He speaks to someone at the DA's office and essentially is told, if you cannot tie him to the body, if you haven't caught him with the body that they believe they heard just splash over a bridge, then you have to let him go. And so they do. Disappointedly, they do. But the evidence that they do find and log in his actual car makes him feel very suspicious. Like, he's out at 3 a.m. He's apparently going to meet this woman because he's a music producer and she is a singer. But again, it is 3 a.m. Every time the police ask him about what he's doing, it's sketchy at best, but there will be times when you can probably think of something where you were in the wrong place at the wrong time, and potentially, if that was looked into, you wouldn't really have an alibi. And that's essentially what's going on here. He's just living his life, even though everything that he says sounds suspicious. And so, since the DA's told them that they have to let him go, they do. But from now on, they want to keep an eye on him, so essentially the whole task force go and park themselves outside his house. Eventually, one of his neighbours pipes up and tells them that he's always getting into trouble. Wayne is such a pest and just really annoying. He's a privileged kid and he's never really had a proper job. And the next day, Holden and Jim go over to speak to him again, just to go over his statement and just make sure that everything lines up with what he said the night before. He goes through his statement again, and at no point is he really getting pissed off with any of it. Most of the detail is still the same, and if it isn't well rehearsed, it's pretty accurate. But once again, Wayne ends up giving some information away that is really weird. The police are out there looking for a killer of children, and he hands them a big piece of evidence. He tells them that he hands out flyers that says, could you be the next superstar or whatever it is, and basically these flyers state, if you are between the ages of 11 and 21, potentially I could get you a record deal. He tells them that he's looking for talent and singers, but obviously they're looking at this and going, this guy isn't looking for that at all. And essentially this is how he lures them into his car and then potentially murders them. Again, we don't know if it's actually him yet, but the evidence really stacks up against him. But nothing concrete, it's all conjecture. At this point, Bill has gone home, and Nancy just keeps asking him whether they can move. It seems that their son has been ostracised from everyone now. No kids come around and play with him anymore, and there's no play dates being set up because nobody wants their kid near him after what happened. The stress is obviously getting to Nancy, and she is literally saying, I want to move, I want to be out of here, I cannot do this anymore, I just need to be away from this. And it isn't helping him at all. Brian is just regressing more and more. But Bill is pig-headed and he obviously needs to be in Virginia for his job, so he keeps telling her no. Holden and Jim go and see a music producer, or at least the owner of a studio. When they're down there, they talk to the owner and he tells them, yeah, Wayne does come in here occasionally, and yes, he does bring children. I've never seen him be inappropriate to them, but I've never really seen him try and get them to sing either. He kind of just brings them in and sits with them and they chat and he makes them laugh and then they go home. But I've never seen him be inappropriate with anyone or harsh with anyone or try and hit anyone or anything. He's a very gentle soul and I don't think it's something that he could do. So the main bit of evidence that they need to find is a body. They head back to the bridge and it's all hands to the pump. They've got teams out there looking all over and trying to find this body. If they can find a body, they can hopefully manage to pin something on Wayne because he was there at the time that this body potentially went over. But of course, with it being a river, it's constantly flowing, so it doesn't matter where this body has ended up. On the night that it happened, they weren't able to search because obviously it was in the middle of the night and the water was dark. So that body could be anywhere by that point. But they do manage to find a fresh body after a while. They find out that the MO is very similar to the other victims, but the problem is the person who's died is actually an adult. Obviously, they are looking for someone who's killed children, and they found an adult. Only one other victim was an adult as well, and so Wayne may have killed these guys, but he may not have killed these kids. But of course, he fits the profile, so Holden is adamant that this is our guy. They tried to speak to the DA about this, and they want to get some warrants written up to basically go through this guy's house, go through this guy's car again, because the evidence that had been in his car that night had actually been cleaned out by the next morning. And a neighbour says that he saw Wayne burning stuff in his back garden. So it seems like Wayne is trying to get rid of evidence and doing it fairly successfully. The team want to bring him in. They want to sit down with him and they want to have a proper chat in the station and make it all official. However, the DA isn't convinced about this and tells them that the last time that they brought someone in, he was jacking off to a mag. That was it. They made such a fuss about it, and now they want to bring in another guy. It caused such a shitstorm last time that we really want to be doing it again. But eventually, from pressures elsewhere, he ends up bringing this guy in. They sit him down, they talk to him about what's been going on, and again, he goes over his statement, he goes over what he said before, and sometimes some of the details aren't the same, so they check on certain details and he refreshes his memory and says, yes, that's what happened. Sorry, yeah, I forgot about that. But nothing conclusive. Once again, he's let go, and this time they try and keep his name out of the press. They send him out the back door, they send him away from the police station without any press involvement. However, the next morning it is all over the press who Wayne is and why he is being interviewed by the FBI. Cameras galore turn up at his house. He starts coming out and handing out CVs because he wants people to see who he is. He also offers them inside and conducts an interview talking about his treatment by the FBI. So he's really playing up to this new fame that he has found. And all the while he is just turning it into a media circus. Eventually Wayne goes and sees the mayor of Atlanta at his home. He takes all the press and the cop cars with him because obviously they're trying to follow him wherever he goes to make sure that he doesn't kill anyone again. In all this time that they've had him under suspicion, there's been no bodies dropping, so there's a good chance that it is him. But again, they have no real evidence of this. When he goes over, he starts yelling and screaming at the mayor, and the mayor heads back into his house, but he's just putting on a display. Once again, he's putting on a show for the people. However, Jim Barney had actually stayed behind to watch the circus leave, and then he sees Wayne's dad come out of his house. His dad jumps in his own car and ends up driving to an airport. He speaks to someone in a hangar, and then after this guy goes, Jim Barney walks in and asks what the guy was actually asking for. And it turns out that Wayne's dad has been looking for chartered flights down to South America to basically help his son flee. Or at least that's what he believes. So whatever they need to do it quickly. They call it in and basically get him flagged as a flight risk. And once again, they go back to watching his house with the press. But while they're sat there, two cop cars just drive up. Cops get out, they walk over to the house, and they arrest Wayne Williams. Everyone else is stunned, no one knows what's going on, and they head back to base. When they get there, Ted Gunn is already there. He tells them what's happened, that basically a bunch of people got around a table, and they found out that the fibres that were found on one of the bodies has actually matched perfectly with fibres found in Wayne Williams' home. So they've got their guy, but they aren't actually going to prosecute him on any of the kids. They're only going to prosecute him on the two dead men. So they have a killer, but it doesn't seem to be the one that they wanted. They hold press conferences, they grandstand, and they basically say, we've done it. We've done the thing that we promised to do. But they haven't. Holden is basically told to take it as a win. This is all he's going to get out of this because the FBI will no longer have his involvement in this case. They're going back to base and they're going to go and do the things that they were meant to be doing. They've profiled the guy, that was all that they were meant to be doing. They weren't meant to be investigating any further. However, when Bill gets back, because of everything that's been going on with his wife, he finds his house empty. His wife has left, his son is gone, and he has no clue as to where. Wendy, it seems, is on her own as well, and obviously Holden is alone. The title then fades to black and we see what actually happened with the cases. It says, as of 2019, none of the other cases where the boys had died or the children had died had actually been prosecuted. So nobody has been found to actually have committed these murders, even though it was heavily believed it was Wayne Williams. And it seems like all the murders stopped after he went to jail. We then see our old friend the ADT man, or the BTK killer, and he is in what looks like a motel room. He has all his accoutrement laid out. He puts a mask on, he puts a noose around his neck, and he starts to go to town on himself, thinking about all these horrendous things that he'd done. And that, unfortunately, is where it ends. So, this has been an amazing series. It really has. And I do wish that they'd given it a third try because, I mean, you've left it on such a cliffhanger. Bill's come home, he's got no one. Obviously, Wendy has been trying to date other women because, well, she's gay and she hasn't come out as gay. She's doing this whole secret life. And fair enough, the area that she was in, it wouldn't have been as accepted. But she's ended up alone because she took offence to something that Kay had said. And it just seems a waste, really, because they did seem like a good team together. But of course, you can't just force it. Same with Bill and his wife. He wanted to force it. He wanted to make sure that she stayed where she was. Even though everyone was looking at her, everyone was judging her, she just wanted to get away and make a better life for their son. And now, that's what she's done. She's left. Holden, again, seems to have no personal life. He seems to be just a loner. And even though he is wearing a shirt that he wore in season 1 where he ended up getting blood on the cuff, and the girl he was with at the time spotted that, it just reminds him that he's alone as well. As for the Atlanta case, the whole thing is shocking. Like, one of the worst things that could have happened in that particular area, like these poor black kids just dying for someone's sexual gratification, is really fucking horrible. And I can't remember if anything has come of it in the last 6 years. I'd like to think something has happened, but nearly 40 years on now. It's not going to go anywhere. And I imagine that some of the women that were actually part of that case have now gone. And they never got an answer to what happened to their child. As for the ADT killer, I believe, and this is only me thinking off the top of my head, that he ended up getting caught recently because of DNA evidence, but that was because I think someone in his family ended up doing one of these 23andMe's or whatever, and it ended up flagging in a database somewhere, and this guy ended up getting picked up. I'm pretty sure that was the story. If it's not, then I know someone actually had that happen, but at the time I don't think he was ever caught, Dennis Rader. But I do know that he was arrested long after his crimes. But yeah, this show was compelling, and I really do wish that there'd been more to it, because I think it was some of the best performances, especially these insane serial killers. Like, I can't imagine how bad it was way back then, because it seemed to be like in the 70s and 60s that there was a fucking serial killer every fucking week or something. It was ridiculous. Like, a lot of the stories that we hear about now on these crime podcasts and stuff, they're all from that kind of era. And I know, there's quite a lot of other shit, but the majority of them will start because they're interested in someone like Ted Bundy or Dennis Rader or someone like that, someone who is from that kind of era. And then they'll start to research other stories, and you'll get, Elizabeth Bathory and people like that. So it was really well done, this series, and even down to the costumes and stuff. Obviously, I'm just going off of what I've seen on TV. So, I wasn't around in the 70s. I'm an 80s child, but you can see and imagine that was the fashion back then, and obviously you'll have seen it in photos and things like that. So it really looked authentic, and it was really incredible. Some of the music in it as well was fucking banging. Some really good 70s music in there. But yeah, it was certainly an eye-opener. I never watched it when it first came out. I watched it a while after because people had raved about it, and I hadn't really had the time to go and watch it. And then I did, and it blew my mind, Hunter. But yeah, I've really enjoyed this show. I've really enjoyed this series, and I've enjoyed this season. Like, the TV shows that I've covered were amazing, and I really enjoyed revisiting them again. And of course, like, Kaleidoscope was something that I hadn't seen, and I really enjoyed watching that. Really enjoyed it. I think it was phenomenal. And then we've got some stuff coming next season that's new to me as well. So I can't wait to get into Bates Motel. Like I said, I've done Clarice, I've done Hannibal, I've done Mindhunter. I think the next step is the Bates Motel, because it's just such a good show. Incredible performances from some of the cast. Freddie Highmore, obviously. But yeah, I've enjoyed this, so thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. I'm getting some really nice feedback from some people online, and, It's good to hear. There's a few on YouTube that have come through recently, and it's nice to see that. But as for today, I'm done. I hope you're all doing well out there. But until next time, I will speak to you soon. Bye. As always, thank you for listening to this podcast, and you could really help me and the podcast by giving a like, share, subscribe on all major platforms that you listen to podcasts on. As an independent podcaster, this will just help me exponentially when it comes to actually doing more things with this podcast. I truly do enjoy this, and I absolutely love revisiting these TV shows with you guys. So any engagement from you is always welcome, and I will try and listen to all of you when you give suggestions or just tell me what you think about the podcast. But once again, thank you for listening, and until next time, I will speak to you soon. Bye.